Students of 11th class, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. As you know, we are reading a lesson titled Discovering Tut. The saga continues, written by A.R. Williams. This is lesson number 3 of the text Hornbill. In today's lesson, we will be discussing from para number 2nd, page 23. Before we start the para number 3, let me recapitulate the previous lesson. Dear students, Tutankhamun, also known as Tut, was a teenager when he died. He was the last successor of his powerful Pharaoh dynasty, which ruled Egypt and its empire for centuries. He was laid on rest, heavily loaded with gold. His tomb was discovered in 1922, which made the world raise a question about what had happened to him and whether he had been murdered. After almost 80 years, his body was about to undergo a CT scan which would give new information and clues about his life and death. His face would be recreated with the help of a procedure called photonic reconstruction. Dear students, a most strange and unnatural wind was blowing as King Tut's body was taken from his grave called Valleys of the Kings, an ancient Egyptian cemetery. Dark clouds moved quickly across the desert all day long, and later they covered the stars. On January 5, 2005 at 6 p.m., King Tut's mummy, which is the world's most famous mummy, was placed in the CT scanner to investigate the mystery behind his death, which had occurred more than 3,300 years ago. Now, this was the recapitulation of the previous lesson. Now, para number 3, para number 2nd, page 23. All afternoon, the usual line of tourists from around the world had descended into the cramped rock cut tomb 26 feet underground to pay their respects. They gazed at the murals on the walls of the burial chamber and peered at Tut's gilded face, the most striking feature of his mummy-shaped outer coffin lid. Some visitors read from guidebooks in a whisper. Others stood silently, perhaps pondering Tut's untimely death in his late teens, or wondering with a shiver if the Pharaoh's curse, death, or misfortune falling upon those who disturb him was really true. This is para number 2nd. Now, let me tell you the meaning of some difficult words. Descended is a one word here. Descended means moved or gathered. Another word is cramped. Cramped means very small to fit into. Descended means moved or gathered. Cramped means very small to fit into. Rock cut means made in a rock by cutting it. Made in a rock cut means made in a rock by cutting it. Gazed means to look in surprise or in admiration. Murals means a painting or other artwork executed directly on the wall. Gilded means covered with a thin sheet or coating of gold. Gilded means covered with a thin sheet or coating of gold. Striking means prominent. Striking means prominent. Whisper means to speak in a low voice. Pondering means think about something carefully. Dear students, let me explain this para. All afternoon, tourists visited 26 feet deep underground rock cut tomb to pay respect to the king. All afternoon, tourists visited the 26 feet deep underground rock cut tomb to pay respect to the king. Many people stepped into the small tomb and looked in the admiration at the murals on the walls of the chamber and took a look at the face of the tut that had been painted with gold. Many people stepped into the small tomb and looked in admiration at the murals on the walls. Murals, that means the painting on the walls of the chamber, and took a look at the face of the tub that had been painted with gold. That means the face of the tut had been painted with gold. While visitors read the guidebooks in a hushed tone, in a hushed tone, some stood silently, wondering about his untimely, wondered, wondered about his wondering about his untimely death in his teen years. They might also be wondering if the curse of the pharaohs of the pharaoh, which leads to the descent of misfortune upon the person who disturbs him, is true. Now, para third. The mummy is in very bad condition because of what Carter did in the 1920s, said Zahi Hawass, Secretary General of Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities, as he leaned over the body for a long first look. Carter, Howard Carter, that is, was the British archaeologist who in 1922 discovered Tut's tomb after years of futile searching. Its contents, though hastily ransacked in antiquity, were surprisingly complete. They remain the richest royal collection ever found and have become part of the pharaoh's legend. Stunning artifacts in gold, their eternal brilliance meant to guarantee resurrection, resurrection caused a sensation at the time of the discovery and still get the most attention. But that was also buried with everyday things he had want in the afterlife: board games, a bronze razor, linen undergarments, cases of food and wine. Now in this para here are some words. Now first word is futile. Futile means pointless, incapable of producing the result of something futile. Hastily means fast. Ransacked means raid. Go through a place to steal or damage something. Ransacked means raid. Antiquity means age, or we can say oldness. Resurrection means restoration to life. Afterlife means life after death, based on the belief that the essential part of an individual's identity continues to the next life after the death of the physical body. This is afterlife. Now let me explain this para. Writer says that as Zahi Hawass, Secretary General of Egypt, leaned over the body to have a look. Zahi Hawass, Secretary General of Egypt, leaned over the body to have a look. He said that mummies was in a very bad condition because of what the British archaeologist Howard Carter did to it in the 1920s. He discovered King Tut's tomb in 1922 after a long search. He discovered King Tut's tomb in 1922 after a long search. The valuable treasures of Tut had been explored earlier too, but surprisingly they were complete. The treasure found at Tut's grave is the richest till date and has come to be known as the Pharaoh's legend. It was artifacts in gold, which are eternally beautiful and as good as new. Such artifacts still get attention. That was buried with the things of daily use like a razor made of bronze, games, linen, undergarments, and boxes of food and wine which he could use in the next life. Now, next para. After months, after months of carefully or recording the pharaoh's funerary treasures, Carter began investigating his three nested coffins. Opening the first, he found a shroud adorned with garlands of willow and olive leaves, wild celery, lotus petals, and cornflowers, the faded evidence of a burial in March on April, when he finally reached the mummy. Though he ran into trouble, the ritual's resigns had hardened, cementing that to the bottom of his solid gold coffin. No amount of legitimate force could move them. Carter wrote later what was to be done. Now here are some words, that is funerary treasures means the valuable things which with which the king was buried. Three, with which the king was buried. Funerary treasures, that means valuable things with which the king was buried. Three nested coffin means three coffins placed one in another in order of decreasing size. The innermost coffin houses the body of the deceased, that is that shroud, that means a length of cloth in which a dead person is wrapped. Adorned means decorated. Adorned means decorated. Garlands of willow means a wreath of flowers and leaves. Mummy means a body of a human being or an animal that has been ceremoniously preserved by removal of the internal organs, treatment with natron and resin, and wrapping in bandages. Right? Let me tell you again the meaning of this word, that is mummy, mummy. Mummy means a body of a human being or animal that has been ceremoniously preserved by removal of the internal organs, treatment with natron and resin, and wrapping in bandages. Ritual means here the resins used in the ceremony of mummification. Resins means a sticky, flammable substance that is insoluble in water. Resin means a sticky flammable substance that is insoluble in water. Legitimate means reasonable. Legitimate means reasonable. Let me explain this para. Dear students, Carter took a few months to record the treasures found in Tut's grave. Then he began investigating his three coffins, which were nested one in another. In the first coffin, he found a piece of cloth with garlands of willow, olive leaves, widely celery, lotus petals, and cornflower, which suggested that he had been buried in the months of March or April. When he reached the third coffin, he was in trouble. The body had hardened due to the resins which had cemented the body, and it had stuck to the bottom of the coffin, which was made of gold. Carter wondered what to do the next because no amount of force could separate the two. Thank you very much.